I am a man from the planets.
A planet man? Boy, wait till the gang hears about this, silly please.
Too close, but two worlds away. It's the Somber Special Access podcast, and we are back, baby. You've been granted highest level clearance to the one-stop shop for news, reviews, and stories of the weird, wild, and wonderfully mysterious haunted planet on which we live. So join us as we investigate all of the fantastic phenomena, incredible claims, felonious fabrications, and sometimes hilarious high strangeness of the planet Earth. Welcome to Special Access. Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the SAP. This episode's guests are Damien John Nott and Ross Coulthart. But before we get to them, I would like to say a massive thank you to all of those of you who have already followed, liked, subscribed, commented, and shared. Stay tuned to that dial, folks, because we have some wild stuff coming up for you in the future. This episode goes down under, so to speak, with Australia's this episode goes down under, so to speak, with Australia's and one of the world's #1 experiencers, Damien John Nott, and the #1 investigative journalist in Australia, Ross Coulthart. Damien Nott was born in 1979 in Sydney, Australia, and grew up in the suburbs of Sydney. His story came to public attention in 2012 after contacting a UFO research organisation in an attempt to find an answer to his ongoing experiences with the phenomena. These experiences peaked in a small country town of Dunedoo, but not before his first sighting at the young age of 9, which spurred him towards a lifelong endeavour to research and understand what he was later to discover is the most misunderstood and ridiculed subject in the world today. Damien has since amassed a prolific body of work documenting his encounters that remain to date unexplained and unparalleled in the field of ufology. We also have Ross with us. Ross is a multi-award-winning investigative journalist with over 3 decades experiences in newspapers and television. He's a 5-time winner of Australia's National Journalism Prize, the Walkley Award, including the highest award, the Gold Walkley, winner of a Logie, Australia's top TV prize, and winner of the New York Film Festival Gold Medal for investigative journalism. Best-selling author of 5 books, with the 6th about to be released, called In Plain Sight, and Ross is currently best known in the UFO community for being host of Channel 7's UFO documentary The Phenomenon, which went down really well. So Ross, you're credentialed AF, as the kids would say. I'd like to welcome you both to the show. Thank you so much for your time. It's greatly appreciated. I'm going to hand it over to John now.
Thanks, Dave. Hi, guys. Hi, Ross. Hi, Damien. Welcome to the show. Okay, Ross, we're going to kick off by asking questions of Damien, but you guys know each other really well, so feel free to jump in at any time with any points or questions you want to make, and then we're going to have a few questions for you, mate. So, Damien Nott, thanks for joining us. I've been wanting to speak with you for quite a while, as we're both experiencers. Though you've been putting me to shame because you're out there and actually documenting everything you spot in the sky, and I'm in here drinking coffee all day in my office. I mean, you make videos left, right, and centre. It's incredible. Some of the things that, some of the videos I've seen and some of the pictures you've taken are absolutely amazing. I think this is the main reason I wanted to get you on the show. I mean, we are basically more seen on UFO Twitter. I don't think you're on UFO Twitter. There's something I want to encourage you to do for before we start. I really would like to see you on there. And everyone, since I've told everyone we were going to get you on, everyone is demanding that Damien Nott comes on UFO Twitter. Okay, just so you're aware. I'll introduce you to everyone. Not a problem. So
great.
So that everyone can get an idea of the sort of things that you've spotted and you've been showing around the world, basically, for the last few years. I'm going to play a compilation of that you recently uploaded to YouTube. I mean, it's a pretty amazing compilation. So let me just kick off by sharing that, and so that everyone can get a chance to see what we're talking about. Just bear with me 1 second while I just share screen. Okay. And we'll just watch this to start with, guys, and then we'll carry on from there.
That's quite a collection.
It's incredible.
Yeah,
I'm speaking as an experiencer who's seen things a lot as well. Amazing compilation that is.
Damien, at what age did you start noticing the phenomena? I know your first sighting was age 9, but had you encountered anything strange before that date? And have you got any idea what triggered your encounters? Were there any tragedies or losses? And does your family have a history of experiencing?
Great question, actually. Excuse me. No, nobody in my family actually has had experiences with this, with the phenomenon. I know my auntie's seen some on the farm here out at Dunedoo, and the farmers don't really care about them. They just call them the lights, and they just sort of brush them off. But nobody else in my family's really had too many experiences or seen. My uncle's seen them here with me, and I've had quite a few relatives see them with me over my life, which has been good. Kind of helps, so they don't think I'm that crazy. But yeah, no. In general, there's not many. There's probably 7 or so people in my own family who've seen it. So yeah, I really I can't explain what they are, what they're about. The whole phenomenon, the more you look into it, the stranger it does become. And if you had asked me, all those years ago when I started reading about it, when I was 9 to 11 and then 12, and I started getting into it more after siding with my brothers, I would have said that they'd come from Mars and they were little green men. And I think there's a lot more to it than that now. Sort of every time you think you have an answer in this field, you get thrown a curveball, and it's so things aren't as straight as what they seem. And anybody who does experience a phenomenon, experiences on a regular basis, will tell you that there's a lot of tie-ins with paranormal, other types of strange phenomena, and a lot of bizarre things that happen on the side, not just UFO related. So, but yeah, before the age of 9, I never really had that much of an interest in it. I know my mum had a book about Bigfoot, and I think I probably read that a little bit maybe when I was a little bit under 9, but it wasn't until after my first sighting I started getting into the whole mystery thing as well, and the whole Forteana kind of side of it. All the mysteries sort of joined up together, and once you start looking at it in that respect, you start to see little bits and pieces that kind of join up and make sense, and little links with other phenomenon. And similar to the way that Jacques Vallée saw the phenomenon, that it's a lot deeper than what we actually think, and it's a lot stranger than just spacemen coming from another planet and landing here. Hey, that may still be happening. Who knows? But I think that there's a phenomenon that exists all the time around humans. It's in a different, we call it the dimensions. We could call it dark matter, ether, a whole bunch of different names for this, other ultra dimensional beings, whatever you want to call them. But they're not just coming from other planets. They're coming from a very similar place to where other phenomenon comes from. And they can be registered and seen on multiple scientific equipment, such as magnetometers, and these things give off radiation as well. So they also affect animals in the same kind of way. So whatever the place that they're coming from and initially come from, and whatever they're giving off seems to be quite strong. But it's a strange phenomenon. It really is.
So Damien, you were age 9. You had not seen anything up until the point you were age 9. Had you been any tragedies in your family? Had been any deaths in your family? No near-death experiences for yourself? Anything like that at all? Trying to figure out what would have actually triggered this for you, because you've obviously got an intensive experience going on since that point.
Yeah, well, I can't think of anything when I was younger, nothing that happened in the family that would have started, no horrific murders or anything like that. I had a bit of a rough childhood growing up out west in Sydney in Blacktown, but who didn't? What kid didn't really? So I've looked into that, and I've tried to think could there have been a trigger? Why me? Why am I seeing this stuff when another million people won't see it in their lifetime? It's so many questions that come up, and I guess it's part of the high strangeness you can strike it up to at the end of the day. But and that comes hand in hand with this phenomenon, the high strangeness side of it. But it's hard. It's really hard to say. I can't put it down to anything at the end of the day. It's just whatever it is omnipresent, and it seems to be around us at all times. Pretty much one thing I'm sure about now, and whatever they are. And we could call it technology or advanced technology, but it's akin to magic, the way that they appear and disappear and the things they can do. And it's just so far advanced of us for our current understanding of physics anyway, that we really have no idea. And I think today's Pentagon release sort of reflects that a bit too. They really don't seem to know what's going on either. Because if they are, they're not really saying. But I don't blame them, because it's a pretty scary phenomenon when it comes down to it. So.
Yeah. Did you have any sleep paralysis when you were younger? A lot of experiences describe not being able to move. I know that when I was a child, I had that quite a lot. I would see big eyes around me when I couldn't move. My mouth would be wide open. Did you ever experience anything like that?
Yeah, it's a scary thing. Not as a child, actually. Only in my 30s, probably mid 30s, did I experience something like that. And I mean, I'd read about it, and it's part of the Forteana literature, and it goes back for thousands of years, reports of it, and everything that goes along with it, every culture and whatnot. But yeah, it wasn't until I was 35 when I had those experiences, so that I can't really say that anything like that brought something into my life or something on in my life. But I did have a kind of a weird little muck around, like a seance-y kind of thing with a friend when I was, I think, maybe 13 years old, 12 or 13, in his house, and some weird stuff happened. His grandmother just died, and he wanted to contact her. He was very spiritual. His family was, so they used to do this sort of stuff as a family. Sit around in circles and do seances. It was really strange, but anyway, and we did it, and the room went ice cold. His dog out the back started barking and scratching at the back door, and his birds in the aviary started going crazy, and the room went really cold and really strange, and we could feel this strange presence, and almost like the sound in the room changed, and almost like we were sealed in some sort of chamber, and it was almost like an echoey kind of weird sound. And then all of a sudden a fly dropped dead in the middle of this circle, with rosary beads and a Bible and a picture of his dead grandmother and all this. And then all of a sudden, I broke hands, and then the next second, everything changed. The room went back to normal. The dogs and birds stopped. And so that was like a paranormal experience I had when I was young. But and that made me, at first I thought he was just joking around, and I was having a bit of a laugh, and then trying not to laugh while we're doing it. But then weird stuff started happening. So, I mean, I've had some strange experiences. The sleep paralysis one would have to be, I'd say, at the end of the day, one of the scariest ones, though. That was quite in your face, kind of scary. Not being able to be in control of your own body, and that's a pretty full on thing.
Yeah, I agree on that one. That's at a recent one, and it was not a pleasant experience, I can assure you. Do you remember your dreams by any chance? Do you always remember? I can't remember my dreams. I never remember a dream. I can't remember the last time I had a dream. Since I was a child was the last time I had a dream.
Yeah. I do sometimes, but I always have the same kind of dreams. Like an apocalyptic future, and I'm running around saving people, and there's these big like bomb holes in the ground, and things are on fire, and buildings are destroyed. I have the same dream constantly. It's really, really weird, but that's the only dream I ever remember. I mean, we're all supposed to dream every night several times at least, right? But we just don't remember them. Most of them we don't have just before we wake up. But it must be frustrating, but though I feel for you not being able to remember some dreams, because some of them you want to sort of remember, some of them are actually good, but other ones you just want to completely forget. It's probably a good thing we forget most of our dreams anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Damien, sorry to interrupt. Damien, besides your dreams, do you get any other prophetic experiences or messages from whatever they are, the others?
No, they don't talk to me like they do other experiences, or I don't hear voices in my head, or I don't get directed or anything to do anything. That's happened once or twice in two separate dreams I've had that were ultra realistic about them. But that's it. They are nothing in real life, but both of those were I woke up in my bed, so you could say I was just dreaming, right? Yeah. So I mean, a lot of people wake up from having these dreams or experiences, and and they're so real, they do believe they've been abducted or whatnot. And who knows? It's a possibility. It's really strange. The thing that made me think twice about it, I could chalk it down to a dream, because I've been reading about the phenomenon for 34 years now. So of course it's going to bleed into your subconscious. Eventually you're going to dream about it. But the only thing that made me think twice about these two strange dreams was everything in the dream was how it's described to a T in the literature about contactees and experiences of abductees, how they see a light, but they can't see where the light's coming from, and there's like a mist in the air, and it's really strange. Everything was kind of the same. Feelings of coldness. It was really bizarre. Thoughts going into my head from this little thing that was walking around the perimeter, and yeah, it was really weird. But I woke up with two marks on my leg, on my left leg, and one was an inch sort of in diameter, and the other one was about half an inch, and they were both like someone had stuck a suction cup on my leg, and sucked the the veins to the surface. It was two perfectly strange circles, and they appeared 3 weeks after each other, directly after these dreams I had. I've never had these dreams since or anything, but a lot of people do tend to experience these lucid dreams, and yeah, they're pretty full on. I haven't had a lucid dream since those two dreams, I must say, but yeah, it's really strange. But at the end of the day, who really knows what happens? The phenomenon is pretty weird.
So have you ever seen? I mean, you've heard of Christopher Bledsoe. He's similar to yourself, but Chris, one of his big encounters was with a woman. He calls her an angel. I saw a female entity as well during one of my sleep paralysis things. I literally woke up, and this is the uncomfortable part for me. It wasn't that long ago, and I literally woke up with my mouth wide open, and this thing was literally next to my face. Yeah, and was annoyed with me and literally floated away from me. My wife can't sleep and has a light on, so that's how I got to see her. Yeah, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. There were long black hair, big eyes. Horrendous.
So you got the hag. You got what they call the hag.
Oh, is that what they call her?
Something similar to the hag, yeah. Well, a lot of people see some tall guy with a big kind of pointy black hat, and a lot of people see a hag, or a lady dressed in 1920s kind of gear, almost like she's a homeless lady with piles of clothing piled on top of herself, and that's seen by thousands around the world, which is really strange.
Oh, this was more like Mortimer Adams, but with huge black bull-like eyes. Long black hair. It was. She was really annoyed that I'd woken up and caught her doing whatever she was doing. She gave me a really, excuse the language, pissed off look when she saw that I'd caught her, and literally floated away. And all the way that she was going away from me, she was looking at me with hate. That's the only way I can describe it. Like, how dare you wake up and catch me doing whatever I was doing, that sort of thing. Have you experienced the hag then? In that case, have you seen her yourself?
Not the hag. I had different experiences altogether. My first one, I had a pressure on my arm, my left arm, and my left side of my chest, pushing me into the bed, and it just kept on pushing. I couldn't talk, couldn't speak, and on the wall, I could just stare at the wall, and on the wall, a big black circle appeared, started spinning around, and it became like, had full parallax, and it sort of came off the wall and then kept spinning, and little bits were breaking off it and going all over the place. And it was really bizarre. The room went red, like a red tinge to it. And then after like about a couple of minutes, it sort of let up. And it was the second time I had it about 2 weeks after the first time, and similar kind of thing. I felt a pressure on my chest, and while my eyes are fully awake, and then I just remember sitting down for 2 seconds, and I'm still awake, and then I see this figure starting to appear, like a head, just about 1.5 feet down from the ceiling, and then probably about 2.5 feet out from the door. So it had full parallax itself, and it was just forming a head, which is big almond, golden glowing almond eyes, like big alien kind of eyes. And I'm thinking, it's going to be like a grey kind of thing, but no, it looked like a transformer or something. In the end, it had all these straight lines that wouldn't even connect or anything. It was just bizarre. And after that, I was just like, okay, I'm not sleeping in that room again. So that was me. No old hags though, thankfully.
See this chair that I'm in now? I've slept in this chair since that encounter with that.
Oh God.
Okay.
Jesus, yeah.
Because that was the effect it had on me. It wasn't a pleasant experience, and I didn't want anyone else in the family to see it. It was really uncomfortable. But you got a question there, Dave?
Yeah, Damien, I've heard you say that sometimes you get a feeling to go outside when something is about to appear. Can you describe what that feeling is and how accurate it is? And do you always get a sighting when that happens?
Okay, the best way I can describe it, it's the closest to, just say you're in a supermarket and you get a strange feeling that someone's looking at you or something from behind, and you turn around and there's someone staring straight at you, and they don't even realize they're doing it or whatever. But and it's just a bizarre kind of feeling, like a weird anxiety. And it doesn't happen that much anymore, which is really strange. It seems to have settled down over the past year or so. But I'm still seeing, I'm still capturing, footage and whatnot, but just sort of no unusual feelings or anything like that. It just sort of petered down after a while. But yeah, it was kind of a feeling of like a little bit of anxiety. Other times it was nothing. I'd just go outside and just happen to go outside at any given time and look up randomly at the sky, and then something will just appear right in the spot where I look, the very first spot I look in the sky, and like a flasher will come on, or a big orange ball will appear, a red ball or something, and then blink out and then disappear completely, or zip across the sky. Or it's really strange. Yeah, it's weird times that they come, but what I have noticed, and it's gone beyond coincidence for me, is that over the past probably decade since I've been talking about it publicly, the subject, after I've done especially big conferences and stuff like that here in Australia or up in the Gold Coast or whatever, we've had, or during conferences, we've had UFO sightings, like incredible UFO sightings. A few people have seen it. We've caught it on thermal cameras or multiple different formats or whatever. But on the way to smaller talks, we've seen UFOs. On the way back from talks, the night before talks, on my birthday, 7 out of the last probably 11 birthdays, they've appeared literally 20 minutes before my birthday, or 10 minutes before, or 20 minutes on midnight, when I turned the February 16th, whatever. So it's really strange. So yeah, and there's no feelings involved in any of those kind of things. That was just a few times that's happened, and not every time that I'd get those feelings, I'd go out and there'd be something. It was probably maybe about 2 out of every 5 times, just say 2 out of every 10 times even. But still, it would happen. So I can't say that the feeling was definitely connected to it, but it's strange when they do come down low, you do get a physical feeling, which is very similar to anxiety as well. So I don't know if that's what I'm picking up and feeling, and maybe I'm just more in tune with the feeling because I've felt it. I've had them close to me in my life, and I know what they feel like when they get close. I'm not sure. I really don't know, but yeah, they're unusual, and they seem to be observing the human race on many different levels, certain individuals for some bizarre reason. And that's what I'm trying to work out with my next couple of documentaries. Why did they do that? And I have no idea, but we're putting out some possibilities that people can go, okay, well, maybe that makes sense or whatever. But just based on what I've experienced myself with the phenomenon. So.
Damien, have you noticed that if you actually go outside, this is how it happens for me, okay? If I actually go out and physically try and look for them without any feeling that something's going to go on, I see nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. Yep. But if I go outside with my dogs and I'm just blasé and I'm, no interest, and I'm just waiting for my dogs, come on dogs, you know what I mean? All of a sudden I'll glance and there is something. Yeah, that's when I'll see things. It's when I don't expect to see anything. That's exactly when I get to see them.
When you get to see them. Yeah, that's right. That's why I say to UFO groups and stuff, if I take a group out for a skywatch, I always tell them there's no guarantee you're going to see a UFO, because they're out there expecting to see it. Even though there's more of a chance they're going to see something in the sky if there's a group of people staring at the sky. Of course, it enhances the chance of seeing something. But if you go out there with the thing that I'm going to see UFO and I'm hanging around these people, so I should see UFOs or whatever, you're not going to see it. And yeah, you're right, like you say, if you're just hanging out or you go out into your front yard to get the mail from the letterbox or to take the bin out onto the curb or whatever, and you just happen to look up and there's some just sitting there flashing at you or doing something, and you just, okay, well, here we go again, run back in and grab the camera or whatever. But
that's when I'm lazy. I'm lazy, and I often don't go back in and grab the camera, because half the time I find that when I take a picture, it just comes out fuzzy. They don't ever come out good, and then I get annoyed and I delete the picture. It's like, Jesus, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah. And I gave up for nearly 10 years. I never took a picture because I got so annoyed with because I had a big sighting with a landing experience, and then after that I would see them all the time, but every time I took a picture it was like a complete waste of time to try and show somebody, because I'd had such abuse when I'd showed people the pictures that I'd taken during the landing. They didn't believe them. Too good to be true, almost, that these pictures can't be real type thing, you faked them. I was getting things like that said to me. So I got annoyed, and I literally shut myself down for 10 years. I'm not taking any more, I'm not getting involved. And I only got back involved because of the Nimitz, you know, with the New York Times. And I thought, oh, well, if I'm going to come out now, I need to start. I bought some cameras now, and I like, actually, the very first time I turned the camera on, within 2 seconds, I had an orb, you know, not on a night vision camera. So I know that I can get them now. So I will do my best to try and catch up with you, Damien. But I live in Wales, and Wales is, as Dave will tell you, even though he's Irish, lives in Wales. Wales is very wet and overcast most of the time, and so we don't even get to see the stars, let alone anything. You know, it's rare. I wish we had a bit better weather.
UFO spotting. Yeah, not the best weather.
You got it.
Yeah, well, you're welcome down here anytime. You just got to put up with the snakes, spiders, and mice. So
yeah, and that's why I won't be coming.
Yeah,
and the drop bears and the rest. So. Yeah.
Okay, so I mainly see orbs, Damien, and I think they manifest my thoughts. I don't know whether we were talking about a little bit about that earlier, or touching on that. Do you think the orbs can manifest your thoughts and appear as other things? Have you noticed that? Because I've thought a few months ago, when everyone was talking about triangles, when triangles were being discussed on UFO Twitter mainly, but on Facebook as well. I thought to myself, I've never seen a triangle. Why have I never seen a triangle in my head? Okay, that night, 3 a.m., my dogs get disturbed. I take them outside, and 3 triangles flew over the top of my house. Never seen a triangle before that point. So they, as far as I'm concerned, they manifest my thoughts. They knew what I was thinking about, and they showed me. Now, I think those triangles were actually orbs. Okay, because I'm convinced that they can manifest as anything, alter perceptions. Have you had any experience of that at all?
When you say orbs, are you talking about visible orbs, or orbs that are just showing up under a flash of a camera or under infrared?
No, orbs.
Infrared?
No, orbs that I can see with my eyes. Yeah.
BOLs.
Orange,
yeah.
Orange orbs normally I see, or orange, red, or white. Those tend to be the colors I see.
Sure. Well, they're the main 3. Yeah, the orange, white, and red. Yeah, they're I've never actually had. Okay, I've put a couple of times. I've put some thoughts out there. Like I had, for one instance, a decade ago, I had Mariana Flynn, who was at the time the president of UFO Research New South Wales, and she was in town. The previous weekend, she had sent some investigators up, and they saw UFOs fly over the house here really low in the daytime, and so and on the farm a UFO stopped as well when a torch was shown on it. But yeah, there was at the same time that Mariana Flynn was in town, there was also 2 Sun Herald journalists in town as well that were going to Coonabarabran because of the fires, but they drove from Sydney, so they needed somewhere to stop and sleep for the night. And so the lady told them that, you know, Mariana was there, and there's a guy up the road who's seeing some weird stuff in the sky. And sure enough, the Sun Herald journalists, they came up and they saw 2 UFOs coming over. But just before they did, Mariana said to me, "Can you get your friends to come? You know, because now would be obviously the perfect time with just 2 journalists here." And so I thought, okay, well, not too much pressure there, but also, you know, I don't have them on a rope. I can't just pull them down, sort of thing. But I thought, hey, I'll give it a shot. And I actually thought in my head, I sat down while everyone's, you know, there looking up at the sky, and I thought, guys, now would be the perfect time to come. And literally within about, I think, 5 to 7 seconds, 2 UFOs came over the house, big white balls of light, changing speed, like playing a game of tag with each other almost across the sky. Like one would catch up to the other one, and the other one would zip ahead further, and then did this across the whole sky. And both the journalist Tim Barlass and his photographer friend, you know, they were blown away by what they saw. And so I agreed that if you know, we saw another UFO or whatever, I'd agree to do the story only if they mentioned that what they saw on the property, and they did. Fair enough, and they did actually. So that was really good. But there's been a couple of times like that where I put some thoughts up there, but then I've put it across. It could be a coincidence, you know, and I'm sort of umming and ahhing about that kind of stuff. I know they do seem to be forward aware of what you're doing on strange times, where you're going. Like a lot of the times I was telling you before about when I go to when I do podcasts, they'll appear. When I do documentaries, they've appeared for documentaries, multiple ones now, which has really spun out. And also, other times as well, when you just looking up at the sky, you just randomly look up and then you look at one spot and they appear right where you're looking. It's almost like they know where you're looking, which is really, really weird. That's happened so many times. And you could stand there a million other nights and look at that one spot, not see anything. But just the way that it happens is it's gone beyond coincidence. So yeah, there is, I agree with you. There is some sort of weird tenuous connection between, people and them. Some people think it's because they might be time travelers from the future and they already know what's going to happen and they're just coming back to see certain events or deter us in certain ways, like with the nuclear weaponry and all that sort of stuff. But who really knows? But they don't seem to let on, where they're from or if they're time travels or whatever they are. There's a million different theories out there, and that's not my job to make up the theories, but I do have a couple of hypotheses on where these things could be coming from, but that's just based on a lot of my recent work.
That leads me to my next question nicely. Do you have any working theories as to why they're drawn to you?
I've looked into my I don't know if they're drawn to me per se, or if it's just that I'm more lucky than most, because I look up maybe more than most, but then you've got the factor that when you go out and you can spend a whole week out purposefully looking for them, not see a thing, but then you go out just randomly and then they appear, and it's happened so many times. I really don't know. It's a hard one to answer that because, like I said, they do the whole phenomenon throws a curveball or every day. The more you look into it, it's almost quite draining. And if it's not the phenomenon draining you, it's like people in the field who want to discount your work, or people who are jealous, or people. It runs the gamut. Everyone wants to bring you down, or everyone wants to bring you up. And it's just, whoa, it's crazy. It really is being involved.
Damien, I get people saying, getting annoyed with me because I'm not that excited about it sometimes. Why don't you take pictures when you see things? Why didn't you stop the car when you saw those objects? I might see three giant, I tend to see 3 giant orange orbs. That happens quite a lot. They travel in threes, about the size of a hot air balloon, massive ones, sometimes. And people say, well, why didn't you say you saw them? Why didn't you take a picture? I've been waiting all my life to see something. Why didn't you see it? But I get the feeling me and you are very similar in that it's so normal for us. You see them all the time, and it's almost okay. You take pictures now because that's part of what you're doing. You're trying to document things. But I just tend to see them, and it's normal. It's not like saying, "Oh, hey guys," I get a little bit excited, but it's you don't actually get any answers, do you? You don't get any answers from it. It's that's the problem.
No. It gets frustrating after a while, and it loses its like when you're a kid, you open a Christmas present and you're all excited. It loses that after a while, and it's almost like a drug. It has to be a better and better sighting every time, or more UFOs to capture your attention or something. But I know exactly what you're saying. A couple of times I've sort of backed away because I'm like, I don't want to be part of this competition. It doesn't really, because that's what it's all about on the YouTubes and all that sort of stuff. It's all a big competition. Everyone's competing with each other and for the best footage and all that. And I'm just like, no one's ever going to get the best footage. And even if they do, what's it going to prove? What, you're going to zoom in on it on a super duper 80 megapixel camera and get a blob of light that's just a little bit clearer.
And if it's too good, they're going to say that's too good. It must be fake.
And if it's too good, it's too good. You can't win either way, right? No. So at the end of the day, you just keep on doing what you're doing. That's it. You don't care what people think. So that's what I've learned. Mate.
That's spot on. Go on, Dave. Or was it me?
Well, I've got a question here. Damien, have you ever had many skeptics in your presence and you've seen something and it's converted them?
I haven't had too many skeptics in my presence. I have actually had two out of the last decade. I was on TV on a show called Today Tonight on Channel 7 here in Australia a few years back now, and had the head of the Australian Skeptics Association on it, trying to tear my work apart, and it didn't end up too good for them. They look pretty bad, but making statements like, "Oh, that moved fast," talking about a UFO that took off from a nearly standing still really quick. It's not really debunking anything like they should be doing as good skeptics, but yeah. I've had, I think, an astronomer who came in the backyard with the purpose of debunking me, and we saw a light appear, move across the sky, stop, and then do a left-hand 90-degree turn and then zip off in this direction really quick. And I know he saw it because he was looking in the same direction as me, and he mentioned it, and he wasn't too fussed about it. But I think it kind of blew his mind a little bit because of the look on his face. Was just, I know that look really well when people see UFOs. I've got a little diary now. It sounds a bit corny, but I got a diary for the last 10 years. So anyone who's seen a UFO with me, because a lot of people were coming a decade ago here to Dunedoo before I left, and also to Taree and hang out and hopefully see UFO. And a lot of people were seeing UFOs who were coming into town were having a bit of a flap at the time. And so heaps of people that seen it. There's a lot of lights zipping around and jets coming into town and all sorts of bizarre things happening. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's one of the strangest things about the phenomenon is the way that people react as well. And that's one thing I've noticed. You'll get 8 people see the same thing, or 7 people out of 10 see the same thing, and then you'll get three people out of 10 see something completely different, which is kind of really strange when you're all looking at the same part of the sky, watching the same object do the same thing. And whether that's got to do with the wiring in the human mind, or the way we perceive things differently,
or they altering our perceptions.
Or
are they manipulating our perceptions? Are they manifesting different things to different people?
Yes, exactly. And Jacques Vallée's brought this up as well. There's a theory that all throughout history, these things have been altering themselves in ways to just appear just slightly ahead of our own technology. If you know about the UFO lore, it goes way back into the big ships of the 1890s and stuff like that cruise around, and a bunch of other weird stuff, even going back thousands of years. Giant shields, swooping armies, and in Roman times, flying shields, burning shields flying across the sky, stuff like that. It's they've been with us all throughout history, but there's the contact part. The contact side of the phenomenon, and not just the lights in the sky or the craft in the sky or whatever. That's the real kind of scary part of the phenomenon for me. If it was just lights in the sky, it'd be okay. But this contact phenomenon, the abduction phenomenon, and this hybrid phenomenon, if that's all real, that kind of lends to there may be something deeper going on with humanity, with what they have planned for us. But at the end of the day, I think that it, like I said before, it's like magic what they're doing, and they have an eye on everything that's going on this earth, and they always do whenever we get together and do military activities, whether it's the Americans, the Russians, other nations. They're always seeing UFOs are seen coming into the sky, white balls of light. Most of the UFO sightings are at least about a good 80 to 83% of them, at least the ones that are reported to me, and it's fairly average too from what I've seen. Most of the reports are of balls of light, varying sizes and colors, and so yeah, and the rest are dotted. We don't see too many triangular craft here in Australia. They're probably one of the rarest ones reported. But in America, different story. There's so many that are seen. It's not funny. So whether that leads to whether they may be some kind of military project, who knows? But that's fascinating at the end of the day. But I just my thing is just photograph, film the phenomenon on as many cameras as possible, and just try and provide some evidence. So when the skeptics try and bring you down, at least, hey, I know you can say in the court of law a video of a murderer murdering someone will put him in jail for a lifetime, but in the court of ufology, a photo or video really mean nothing. It doesn't really tell you anything. It doesn't tell you what they are, what they want, why they're here, all the million other, the plethora of questions that humanity has and that we'd love to ask them, a photo or video doesn't really tell you much.
That's why I haven't bothered, mate. It's why I haven't bothered taking pictures.
Well, I don't blame you, because you can't win either way, really, at the end of the day. No. But, I'd rather have like a photo and a video of a sighting when I'm telling someone, that I saw this, I saw that. It's not just a story; it's also a story with photo and video evidence. So you go, "Whoa, okay, well, that's pretty strange."
Have you ever been in a crowd of people when only you can see the object, and all they can see it, but they seem to be very, very not interested? So you're pointing out there's a UFO, and so these people may never have seen a UFO, okay? But you point it out and you say, "There's a UFO there. Are you not looking?" There's a UFO. And they are absolutely nonplussed by it. That has been my experience. It's been like I either don't get any witnesses at all, and it's just me, or I'll be in a bunch of people who are not interested. I mean, it's a UFO, Everyone on the planet, as far as I would, you would think, would want to see aliens from another planet if it's aliens. You would think. That's not been my experience. When I've pointed these out, and I've been in crowds, and I'm going to talk about now firework displays where I've pointed out UFO at a firework display, and nobody's interested.
Yeah.
I'm going to show a video now. That was my next question, actually. I mean, I described. I mean, Dave knows, because the first interview I ever did was with Dave, and I told Dave about how I see these objects at firework displays. I had a landing in 2000 and a landing incident in 2010, and ever since that time I noticed an object, a green orb. And a few weeks after the landing experience, it was bonfire night, which is firework display night in the UK. Everyone has fireworks, and then I started noticing that these things were appearing during firework displays, and I was telling everyone, they come in like a satellite, nice and slow, stop, and it's like the firework display goes on, and then they move away. It's nuts, absolutely nuts. So you filmed one of these, didn't you, Damien? I'm going to show the video now, just so that people don't think I'm being stupid about this. We're not the only ones as well. I've seen that you've done this. I've said this, and since then I've noticed there's a few other people have also said we can draw these things in using fireworks. I actually told Brandon Fugal at Skinwalker maybe he should send up a few fireworks the other day, and they should film it. So let me just share this video that you took before, and I've not shown it from all the way through. I'm showing it from the point where you can tell that this is a strange object in the sky. So bear with me a sec. Let me just share screen.
Film like a future post-apocalyptic kind of environment set up there with people surviving.
In the shadow of these civilizations.
That's pretty flipping insane, man. It looks really similar to Hill End, the Gold Town Hill End. Up near That's awesome. Is that the one where they filmed that? No, it's a different place down in Victoria. They filmed this a photo shoot years ago in an abandoned little town. And they were filming not a photo shoot, a band was filming like a music video, and this ghost thing just floated past them in the background. They were all swearing.
I wanted to show you.
Sunny house, man. Yeah, that's nice. I like those ends, man. Yeah, that's beautiful.
But I was looking at it because it looks like American.
Is that the one you went into and you were cheering and you spoke to the lady?
the point is, we can see these things at firework displays. Is that the only time you've seen that happen, Damien? When you filmed that, and did you actually see that object, or was that something that was just picked up on the camera afterwards? Were you using like a night vision or something like that?
No, I just had two, one 4K camera next to a full HD. I think it was a DSLR on filming in full HD, sitting side by side, and I just started filming and talking. And this thing, because we were already up on the highest point in Sydney, basically in this area, just just south of Blacktown, and basically, yeah, just set up. And this thing was much higher than what we were at the time. So we're looking ahead at the fireworks. So this thing is like right up higher than the fireworks. So no, I didn't see it at the time, and I don't think anyone else did either. Because I mean, a lot of us were looking in that direction, but a lot of us were talking. You can hear it on the video. A lot of us are just yapping away. So yeah, we didn't actually see it at the time, and that's the sneaky part of it too, because we were there with that purpose of seeing if the firework would attract any light in the sky. So yeah, they were very sneaky the way they went about it. This light that appeared was this, especially when you zoom in on it, it's fully green, like a white green color, emeraldy kind of green. I think you describe it as.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That was the same color, was it? I didn't notice that, because I only ever see the green ones for some reason at firework displays.
That version that I've put up on YouTube is only the full high definition version. I'm actually releasing the 4K version in Haunted Skies coming up, and it shows it much clearer, and it shows the object, and I've actually zoomed in on it. You see that it's a fully green object zipping around. It would disappear, reappear, drop from the sky, then zip straight back up. It was doing some really bizarre things, and all of a sudden it just at an angle dives towards the ground, and it actually dove in front of, like, I think about a 15-story building in Western Sydney, and it went right in front of it and just melted into the ground, and it was gone. And it covered the length of this 15-story building in a matter of probably about a second and a half. That's how quick this thing was going.
Was that the first time you'd seen them at firework displays, or is it something that has happened regularly since, or before then?
Only twice in my life have I seen them. That was well, I mean, I didn't see it that time, but I've seen them at 2 other fireworks displays, and that would be, I guess, a third time, but I didn't see it. But so I know that they do seem to be very curious about a lot of things, about our technology, our airplanes, where we are with everything. And lights, and war and bombs and things.
If you think of the Foo Fighters, when the Foo Fighters used to appear when the flak was going up against the planes, there'd be explosions going off, obviously, around the planes, and then these orange orbs, they called the Foo Fighters in the Second World War, would appear. I'm wondering whether it's the same sort of thing that is happening. You know, we're sending up fireworks, there's explosions. I don't know whether it's the explosions or it's the light. Maybe it's the white flashes, you know, the light flashes that are attracting them or something.
Well, they do strange. Seem to move intelligently. The Foo Fighters, the balls of light that are appearing around fireworks, they're basically the same things. They're very curious. They would mimic, when the pilots would veer to the left or right, these things would hang on their wingtips and mimic their movements, and they do the same thing following humans on Earth. I had the same thing happen to me when I was 9. With a red ball of light just a few feet above my head, and that was mimicking my movements, and it freaked me out eventually, and I ran home. But just recently I was looking into one of Jacques Vallée's latest books, Wonders in the Sky, and there's a case back in the 1500s back in Germany, where a gentleman was walking into a town, walked over a bridge, looks up above him, sees a red ball of light, small red ball of light following him, mimicking his movements. So when he would stop walking, it would stop. He would start walking again. It would continue following him. And that's exactly the experience that I had. And it's been had, 500 years ago, basically, by somebody else, which is really bizarre. And this guy got into town, and other people in the town saw this red light following him. So they were shutting their doors, and the pubs would close and everything, because they were very spiritual in Germany back then, and so they saw it as a bad omen or something evil or nasty, that was following this guy, so they wouldn't let him into the building. So It's but it's been with us. It's been with humanity for a long time. This phenomenon.
I'm talking about you used to get red orbs following you. When I was a child, I used to get, when I'd be outside in the fields. I lived in the countryside. Okay, so I'd get white orbs following me around. They'd be like 100 meters away from me. They'd never get that close to me, but I'd always spot them following me around. And if I went into the forest or the woods, smaller woods, they change color to red. Very strange, you know. And I got used to it. I didn't have many friends as a kid because none of my friends could see them. You know, I point them out initially, and none of them could see them, and I literally had to keep it from my friends. In the end, I had to keep it from my family. I never told anyone. I've gone through this all my life and not told anyone. My mum knows from about 12 months ago. Let's put it that way. That all this has been going on all my life. I've never told them. You know, nobody in my family knows. It's absolutely mad. And I feel bad about that now. To be honest with you, I should have opened up a lot earlier, and you know.
Yeah. It's not an easy thing to do with family and friends, and I know I spent many of my younger years scared to talk about it. You know, meet new people. You don't want to bring it up because you don't want them to think you're crazy.
Yeah.
You know, you always, whenever you do think, you know someone well enough or whatever, and you do bring it up, you either get the eye roll or one out of every 5 people will say, "Oh yeah, I saw something too," you know. And so some people will go, "Oh yeah," and you know, tell you what they saw too. But most people are still like, you know, closed to it. But I'm hoping, you know, that's changing nowadays because of the internet and a few other things, and you know, good documentaries going out there and stuff like that, and more attention being paid to it. I think because of COVID, a lot more people are staying home watching documentaries and stuff like that, so they're getting a lot more knowledge about the UFO phenomenon and all that sort of stuff, and more interest in it because sightings have peaked around the world during this COVID period, and I think there's a few reasons for that. And like we were saying before, they come at certain times, certain things attract them. They've always come at war times. They've come at famine, times of plague. You know, they've been reported literally throughout history in these times of human crises, at war times especially, and stuff like that, especially when humanity's on some sort of precipice or whatever. And I think if you look at the world nowadays, it seems like we're dangling on some crazy unknown future, you know, that we don't really know what's going to happen. So scary times for humans at the moment. So, you know, if these things can sense or like you were saying before, pick up on thoughts or whatever, they'd be picking up on a lot of scared people's thoughts around the world at the moment. So, yeah, so it's pretty crazy times.
Go for it, Dave.
Damien, have you had any strange experiences involving owls?
No, nothing involving owls.
No.
I was on the lookout for it because of the whole high strangeness and owl thing, you know, years ago when I started talking about that. I did keep my eye out for owls, but I only ever saw, at all the times I did go out, you know, to go sky watching, I only ever saw one owl. So it's pretty pathetic, but I don't know. I was in like deep in the woods in Taree. So yeah, I can't say that I've had much experience with owls myself, no.
Somebody asked me the same question. I can't remember. You might have been in the interview, Dave. I can't remember now how it came about. But somebody said, "Have you seen owls?" And I hadn't seen that many owls. But the night before I was asked, an owl had flown into my window of my house.
Oh, wow.
How weird is
Typical.
that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love these stories. They're the best.
Yeah. Do you have any paranormal interactions at all, Damien? Because after my major experience when I was 15, I saw a miles wide craft. After that, we moved home to a very old country house, mansion house, and I started experiencing ghosts. I'd never experienced ghosts, and it was literally weeks after this event, this major event when I was 15. Do you experience ghosts?
Yeah, I must say that I have experienced what people would call ghosts. We've captured a fair bit of really decent evidence in this house here on thermal camera, on video, and a strange green mists floating through the house, and then disappearing into the hallway after they become a bright light, like weird stuff like that. Things flying off the shelves and then something else flying off and landing perfectly on top of it. Torches that are dead turning on and flashing, that haven't got batteries in them, and weird things like that. Yeah, we've had some really strange bizarre effects on camera equipment as well, and whether that's paranormal related, who knows? But we have the same sort of things happen when we go out and investigate UFOs, and if one's close or whatever, or the magnetic field's going off or whatever, you got a good chance that something's interfering with either your SD cards, your memory cards, or your memory on your whatever you're recording on. We've had multiple failed memory cards, batteries fail. It happens in both the ghost phenomenon and the UFO phenomenon as well. So there's another little strange link there. Both of them block the Earth's magnetic field, the localized magnetic field, when they're around as well, and can be picked up on good old school trifield meters. So yeah, it's I've had quite a few weird experiences. In this house here, 3 people have died in the past 14 years, and including my grandmother. And on the day of her funeral, I wasn't here at the time, but my auntie told me she came back from the funeral where they just buried my grandmother, and she opened the door, and here's my grandmother sitting in the same spot where she would sit for years, in front of the sink on a chair, and just sort of commanding the house, like the way she did for years, sort of thing. And she had some problem with fluid in her legs, so she couldn't move much and whatnot. So here she is sitting there staring through my auntie, while my auntie's standing at the door, seeing her dead mother, who she just buried, in front of her, in front of the sink. And then she just disappeared or dissipated. She said just 1 second she was there, next second faded out, gone. And that's another thing that happens with the UFO phenomenon, especially balls of light and the ways that they
It's
can
the same
fade
topic,
out.
isn't it, Damien? I think it's it's
Basically.
totally related. It is the same
Yeah.
thing completely.
Yeah,
we see orbs coming from the outside, coming through walls. I get the feeling these are exactly the same orbs that we're seeing in the sky. That they could just literally change and be any shape they want to be. Enter out. I've got a feeling as well when they talk about the problems with the nuclear facilities with these orbs that are turning up and the craft that are turning up. I get the impression what we're not being told is these orbs are actually entering the buildings, and we're not being shown the actual video cameras. We got a bit of a hint when Bob Bigelow of Bigelow Aerospace showed us an orb that had entered a room. And I know for a fact that they were very worried about that orb because it entered a room where they had low-grade nuclear material. And this orb came in through the wall and it investigated like a drone, and then it left. And they caught it on film, and they showed it on Twitter, and everyone was saying, oh, it's a dust particle. It's not a dust particle. This thing was moving around, literally all around the room. It was absolutely crazy. And I know from scientists who have told me that they were amazed that video got shown. Okay, so it got out there, and to me that proves that these things are the same. These are we're calling them ghosts. I don't think they're ghosts. That's just the term we're using because we don't know what they are.
Exactly. There's a good analogy. If you're a ghost hunter and you see a ball of light inside your home, you're going to call it a ghost. If you're a farmer and you see a ball of light over your property or on your property, you're going to call it a min light here in Australia, or a mystery light, what you guys call it, similar to the Marfa lights of Texas or Brown Mountain lights in Carolina or whatever. And if you're a ufologist and you see a ball of light in the air, you're going to call it a UFO. But in reality, they're 3 of the same thing, and people don't really understand that yet. These things are interdimensional, a good deal of what's happening. Like I said before, I think some of these like more metallic type craft and other strange craft that are coming are probably from other planets, who knows? And they're tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years more advanced than us, and they can get here, whatever. But I think that there's a section of the phenomenon, a core of this phenomenon, which is remaining here at all times. It's because it doesn't make sense that they would continually come and then just grab Farmer Joe and take his DNA and then come back another couple of years later, do it again. But they're doing this to tens of thousands of people around the world. So why do they need to constantly check our DNA? So that if that is true and that's happening, that even opens the door up to other possibilities of what could be going on here, much scarier possibilities. So.
Damien, have you ever tried CE5? Do you even need it? What's your take on it as a tool for making a contact of some sorts?
That's a good question. I've actually participated in a few C5s. I think 3 or 4, and probably 3 of them had nothing happen. A couple of nice meteorites, that was great. But one of them, something happened only when I left the main group and went to another side of a cliff in a completely different area. And then I saw a UFO and filmed one, appeared above an aeroplane and sort of followed it. But yeah, I've had no luck with C5s myself. I mean, it doesn't mean it doesn't work for other people, but it just, I had more luck, like I said, going out and taking the rubbish bin out and throwing the rubbish in the bin and looking up. So it's not, good on Dr. Greer for what he's doing and whatnot, but getting people interested in the phenomenon. But for me personally, it doesn't do anything. So.
And have you ever tried remote viewing?
No, I haven't actually. I haven't really tried anything like that. I've done some strange psychic kind of things in my life. I guess we all have some weird little moments like that where things happen, but no remote viewing. I've read about it and know that Uri Geller was quite the apt remote viewer at one stage. And yeah, but no, I never have. How about yourself?
No, I'm very interested in it as a tool for a contact of some sorts, but no, I've never tried it seriously, nor CE5. I'm just very interested in what experiencers like yourself, how they view it as a tool.
Well, we know Lou Elizondo is actually using or has used and was trained by remote viewing, was trained by Hal Puthoff. Hal Puthoff actually told me that a couple of days ago, just so you're aware. He joined the program a few months before the program ended, SRI. Okay, just so you're aware. Is it you, Dave, or me? Where am I?
It's you, John. Go for it.
Okay. What do you think we're interacting with, Damien? I keep changing my hypothesis over the years. I mean, I used to always think it was ET, because I wasn't really taking that much part in the debate before and really looking what other people were saying or even bothering to read other people's books because I didn't want to be influenced. I was trying to understand for myself. If I saw something, I wanted to know for myself and try and decide. But what do you think we're actually dealing with? Do you think it's ET? Do you think it's dimensionals? Do you think it's time travelers? Where are you at this point?
I'm up in the air about all of that. That's why I just concentrate on video and photographs as much as possible, because I mean, you could go down a million different roads with this, and like I said, I've thought of all of those possibilities in the past. It could be a bunch of things. It could be extraterrestrials, like we like to call them, i.e. individuals or aliens from other planets. It could be interdimensional beings. It could be something to do with Earth here being alive itself, and these lights, how they crash into Earth, into our oceans, into our mountain ranges, without even affecting the Earth around them. So who's to say that this phenomenon isn't natural, some type of natural phenomenon, but it's alien to our understanding or our current understanding of what the world's about. We're always finding out about new species on this Earth. We're always finding it. Most of our oceans haven't even been investigated. The bottoms of our oceans, most of the upper Earth's atmosphere hasn't even been investigated properly. So who knows what's living up there? There's a whole bunch of strange, possibilities here. What's going on? Whether they're time travelers too, that's another thing as well, or if it's just an omnipresent kind of some type of strange observation. They use these balls of light to do it, and some of them go invisible, as you're saying. They could be around you, you don't know. But yeah, they're really strange. And I'm still up in the air about it. Like, I love to say, oh, it's this, or it's it's the tall whites from Venus or whatever. I can't say. At the end of the day, I really can't. I'd love to be able to say everyone wants to know the answer and all that sort of stuff, but after 34 years of looking into it, I can't give you an honest answer which is 100% definite, because these things don't talk to me, and even if they did, how would you know to trust them? These things are tricksters. They do some really tricky, strange, bizarre things, and as an experiencer, you'd know. And so, yeah, it's whatever they're up to, whatever this whole strange intergalactic TV show that's going on, whatever that's all about. That it goes beyond strange. Yeah. So hence the high strangeness of the topic. It's really full on. I'd love to know the answer, but at the end of the day, I've become resigned to the fact that I may die and not ever know an answer, and I'm happy with that now. So
I'm not. I'm not happy with that.
You want to
Okay,
know.
which is why my Twitter name is I Want to Know. Okay.
Okay. I need to know. I have to know now, right now.
Can I just jump in quickly? Ross, you've been sitting here listening to us talk about all this strange stuff, abductions, magic, entities, ghosts, orbs. What's your take on it as possibly the most seriously credentialed of the four of us?
I doubt that, but my view is there's a phenomenon. It's real, which for me is a big step. I think the question of what it is the issue. I think for most people in society, the thing I find really fascinating about this whole subject is I've been sitting here listening to my friend Damien, who I met quite a few years ago, and I was working for, I think, 60 Minutes, which is an Australian news current affairs program at the time. And I just sat in his living room, and he showed me his videos and told me about his experiences. And it's such a cognitive dissonance from everyday life, from everyday reality. And yet I don't doubt that what Damien's experiencing in his mind is real. And certainly seeing the videos, he's videoing something that's real. And for me, the mere fact that we now have in a society one of the most powerful militaries in the world, one of the most powerful intelligence services in the world, acknowledging the reality of the phenomenon, is why I think today's UAP task force report is important, because it's basically saying definitively for the first time, officially, yes, this is real. You can't feel stigma or ridicule. You don't need to be embarrassed about it. There is a genuine phenomenon. And I think as I'm listening to Damien and my head's just exploding with some of the things that you're talking about, it just blows me away. I mean, one of the things I was dying to ask you about, Damien, was the fact that in a couple of those amazing images that you've got, there's one very distinctive tubular cylindrical object that looks just like the Tic Tac that Dave Fravor, the F-18 squadron commander, described. How big was that object that you saw?
It's hard to say because I don't know the distance that it was away, but judging by the angle, and maybe if I probably use a bit of brain trigonometry, going by guess, I'd say maybe about 30 feet in length, maybe a bit smaller, 20, 25 feet. It's real. I can't give you 100% definite on how big it was. Didn't hang around for long, so it just sort of hovered, tilted on an angle. Then it readjusted itself and it went perfectly horizontal again, tilted on an angle again, and then it just blinked out or took off. I don't know what happened. I looked down at the camera for 2 seconds and then I looked up and it was gone. So,
yeah. I mean, I find all that amazing because, I mean, for me in everyday life, there's the mundanities of just dealing with putting out the garbage and making the car fill up with gas. And in between all of this, there are people like yourself who are doing these extraordinary things. And I just find it fascinating because in many ways, we now have a license to actually start engaging with it and taking it seriously. I've been really struck by how a couple of times in this conversation, it's come up how a lot of people don't seem to notice the phenomenon or they're willfully blind to it. And I think one of the most interesting moments for me was when a lovely fellow in the UK called the Mind Sublime obtained what I call Slide 9, which is the DOD threat scenario. And it talks about how, and this is a briefing that went, and I say this to friends of mine at dinner parties, and I say, they say, Ross, why are you writing a book about UFOs? And I say, well, because it's real. And then there's this kind of pregnant, embarrassed pause, and somebody takes another sip of their wine, and they say, really? And I say, yes. the US Department of Defense has admitted that there is a real phenomenon, that there are apparently intelligently controlled craft, objects, moving around in our skies, in our oceans, and indeed in our orbit, that are doing manoeuvres, speeds far beyond known human technology. And I find that amazing, but I am also fascinated, and Damien is one of the people that I've come across who intrigues me the most. I'm fascinated by the fact that so much of this comes back all the time to human consciousness or human perception, and that whatever the phenomenon is, there's a great paper written by Eric Davis, the enigmatic doctor who worked with the NIDS for a while, and he talks about the psychotronic effects, the capacity in the Cash Landrum incident, the UFO sighting in Texas and the UK, how they saw, I think it was 28 or 48 helicopters,
23.
including heavy Chinooks coming towards them. And clearly there weren't that many helicopters in the sky, but whatever it was manipulating their perception, their consciousnness. And so I guess, Dave, to answer your question, I keep on coming back to the fact that whatever this is a phenomenon that has the capacity to meddle with human perception, human consciousness, which is mind-blowing.
Mm-hmm. Truly.
I was speaking to Eric Davis at the science conference. You were there as well, the SCU conference, Ross. And I asked Eric about Cash Landrum. He pointed me. He basically was talking to somebody else, and he brought up Cash Landrum and said, "Look at Cash Landrum when we're looking for whether or not they can manipulate perceptions and stuff." And he basically said to me that they'd looked at where those helicopters could have come from, and there was nowhere they could have come from, and there was no accounting for them at all. And there were 23 Chinook helicopters. I mean, I've had Chinook helicopters, you know that, Ross, incidents with Chinook helicopters as well. I've asked you about that privately, Damien, before, whether or not you've seen any helicopters that you're not sure are actually helicopters following you around, because I seem to have had quite a few encounters with, they tend to be helicopters, and I don't know why, but Chinook helicopters that are not showing up on flight radar. You know, there's nothing, no way of knowing, there's no way of knowing what they are. You know, there's no markings on the side. They vanished before my eyes. The sound has vanished as well at the same time. You know, you can hear a massive Chinook helicopter that's very close. They're deafening, and yet I've seen them literally vanish. I've had one almost land on top of my house, and yet I've run outside. The whole house is shaking. I've run outside. I can see lights all around the house. I run outside, and as soon as I open the door, boom, gone. Nothing there. You know, very, very strange. It's part of the frustrations of this topic that, you know, you haven't got a clue what the hell's going on. Am I being manipulated? But on that occasion, my roof got damaged as well. I actually had a damage to my roof. We had a leak in the spot. You know, the very next day we had a leak in floors. So the whole house was shaking. Very strange.
The one I found interesting with you, John, was where you described the vans, the black vans that were monitoring the site where you'd seen those objects. And it was in a field that was ordinarily locked. But when you spoke to the farmer, there was nobody who'd gained access to his farm with vans of any type in the preceding few days. Yeah,
it was the next day after the landing. I worked from home, and literally the next day after the landing, I looked. When I worked from home, I had an office overlooking the spot where this thing had landed, and I was in the office the very next day after the landing, and I spotted 2 black vans out on the marshes, on a track on the marshes at the very spot, and there were 3 guys out there with metal detectors, or what looked like metal detectors, scanning the very spot where this thing had been. And I'd never seen anyone at that spot in the previous 2 years. You know, it was in the middle of the marshes. It was a private road that led down from the local castle. And I went and spoke to the farmer, who, you know, was in control of the gates that let people in out there. And he told me, he looked at me with a puzzled expression when I told him what I'd seen, and, you know, that I'd seen these guys. And I said, "Who were these men that you let out there?" And he said, "I've never let anyone out there. You know, nobody's ever been out there apart from me, and I very rarely go out there." He took me down to the gate that was locked, padlocked, rusted up. private keep out on a sign and said, there you go, nobody goes out there. And yet I'd seen these black vans the very next day. I mean, they had to be black, men in black and all that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they were black. I prefer it if they were white, if I'm honest,
Yeah.
just so that I haven't got to say they were black vans. But strange one, that, Ross. Yeah, and I've heard people telling me since then that maybe those were SAS guys and part of some that go in. Basically, we hear about metals that drip from these objects sometimes with the orbs or white powders that are seen. And maybe this was a clear-up team that they were going in to, take away anything quickly that had been left behind, or making sure that nothing had been left behind. So, yeah. Have you ever seen anything like that, Damien? While I've got you here, have you ever seen any metals dripping from orbs, or have you ever seen anyone turn up to check an area where a landing has been?
Not with the landing. I've had helicopters show up while UFOs are actually there, present in the sky. I've had a helicopter show up literally probably 5 minutes to 7 minutes after UFOs have departed that area. But in relation to metals, or what you just said a second ago about white dust or something like that coming from these orbs, that's really funny, because I've got a few videos of these things, some high up, some much lower, yellow orbs during the daytime, basically with something opening up in the side of them and spitting out this white mist, and I don't know what that was about. I've got ones up higher, these white kind of balls that seem more like living creatures than anything, and got them moving across the sky with smaller balls that would appear out of nowhere and then enter the larger ball, and then the ball keeps on moving along, and other balls would appear out of nowhere and enter it. And it's really strange. Like, there's reports all around the world of these balls, larger ones with smaller balls exiting them, and then smaller balls flying about, doing their thing, coming back into the bigger balls. Same as with the cigar type craft as well. Some balls of light are seen exiting those on occasions and entering them as well. And so it's really strange. I don't know what that phenomenon is, but yeah, I've never actually seen the dripping metal one myself. I mean, I've had a metallic one open up in front of me, in front of a couple of witnesses, which I got on camera as well. Just full metallic ball, perfect, like a chrome kind of finish, and then opens up to reveal an orange ball inside the metallic covering. And then it spins around and flies up into the sky, and it's gone. So really strange things like that. But yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing some dripping metal. That would be something different,
Yeah,
I guess. I'll go for that. Yeah.
Let's go back to you, Ross. You're one of them, and you've almost answered this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You're one of the world's top investigative journalists. You've covered war zones, terrorism, politics, drug gangs, murders, all the major topics. What are you doing covering this toxic topic? Most journalists would run a mile. I mean, thank you for covering this topic. First of all, I want to say,
I think the subject of UFOs has always intrigued me, because it has always been the most taboo subject in every aspect of my career. I've never. There are certain issues in journalism you don't go near. Until very recently, one of the things you never went near was philandering politicians doing the wrong thing. Sexual affairs and politics and stuff like that. But it seems to be open season on that now. But what really struck me was when I was working on a major national newspaper. I'd be sitting on the desk late at night. If you were a young reporter, one of the things you'd pray for would be something to happen on the late night shift to keep something interesting happening. And you'd always get people ringing saying, I've seen a UFO. And you'd ring, I can remember a couple of times ringing the duty night editor and basically saying, oh, look, there's a guy out Parramatta. He saw a craft with windows hovering over Parramatta in Western Sydney. And he'd slam the phone down on me and say, ring me back when you've got a real story, Ross. There was this huge taboo about the subject of UFOs that I've always been intrigued by. And another formative influence for me was I was living in New Zealand when Quentin Fogarty, an Australian cameraman, filmed what were called the Kaikoura lights, the UFOs that were seen off the northeast coast of the South Island of New Zealand in Christmas 1978. And they were a huge hullabaloo at the time because they came only a few weeks after the loss of Melbourne pilot Frederick Valentich, who disappeared in Bass Strait in a light Cessna. And so there was a kind of a public awareness, if you like, of claims of UFOs at the time. And then all of a sudden there's this amazing sighting on the east coast of the South Island of New Zealand. And at the time we had a Prime Minister called Robert Piggy Muldoon, and he immediately, probably within a week, the Air Force, the New Zealand Air Force came out and basically said, it was squid boat lights reflecting off clouds. There was nothing to it. And years later, two things happened to me. I interviewed Piggy Muldoon, and as a former
Is that his
Prime
real
Minister,
name? Hang on, I've got to ask. Is that his real name?
No, that's what we called him. He was this sort of cherubic, round-faced guy, and just inevitably everybody called him Piggy. But he was a lovely man and a very colourful character. And on a one-on-one, he was quite open, and he made some admissions to me that he knew full well that the explanation of reflected squid boat lights reflecting off clouds did not wash. And then years later, I met John Cordy, who was one of the air traffic controllers at Wellington Airport when the incident took place. And he tracked these objects on radar. And John, God bless him, he's in his 80s now. And he actually said to me, he said, look, Ross, if they were fucking fishing boats, they were at 14,000 feet and they were tracking the cargo plane. And he says, I've never seen fishing boats fishing at 14,000 feet before. And he, to this day, is adamant that there was nothing wrong with his radar set, which is what the Air Force asserted. And he was backed up by his colleagues. And it really struck me that there'd been, and even from the admissions that I got privately from the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, it was quite obvious to me that there'd been American intervention in the event, that the Americans were involved at an intelligence level, talking to the then Prime Minister of New Zealand. It was obvious to me that there'd been a deliberate attempt to essentially close down the whole story. And I've seen this happen a few times. And then I came to Australia and I was working for probably Australia's premier public affairs program, a bit like your BBC Panorama. It's a show called Four Corners. And I was doing a story that touched on issues relating to the Australian Air Force. And we were spending a lot of time with very senior officers of the Australian Air Force. And as they were wont to do at the end of a long day's filming, they'd say, why don't you chaps come for a beer? And so we went for a beer and we're sitting in the mess. And after 2 or 3 beers, one very senior officer says to me, why don't you chaps do something about UFOs? And I'm sort of halfway through taking a beer, and I go, because they're bullshit, they're rubbish, you know. Who does stories on UFOs, you know? And he says, no, they're not. We see them all the time. And then we're in a mess, and he calls over all these pilots. So there are all of these illustrious pilots from New Zealand, Australia's Air Force coming over, and they're all sitting there going, well, you're not recording this, are you? And I go, no, of course not. Well, yeah, we see them all the time. And
we are now. I just tell everyone we are recording it right now.
And I was quite shocked and I was quite amazed because the same person encouraged me throughout much of the rest of my career before he passed away to keep on digging. And every now and then, periodically, he'd ring me when I was on different current affairs television shows, and he'd say, how's the UFO story coming along? And it became a bit of a joke that I was interested in this subject. And it's why I've sought out people like Damien, because I've seen the stories about Damien. He did a fantastic movie called Australian Skies, which was a lovely play on words. And it's a very interesting movie for anybody who's interested in the subject. And I've seen the authenticity of what Damien does. There's absolute truth in what he says. And I did a story as well. Another formative influence for me was the Rendlesham story. I'd always wanted to do the Rendlesham story, Raf Bentwaters, and through happy circumstance and serendipity, because another story fell over when we were in the United States, when we were in the UK. The bosses agreed, oh yeah, let Coulthart do that story on those crazy UFO people up in, England. And so I interviewed Charles Holt, who was the colonel who had a top secret clearance, who had basically done an audio recording of what he saw that night. And we interviewed a prominent British skeptic who basically tried to poo-poo the whole thing. And I remember coming out of it thinking, that debunker doesn't know what he's talking about. He really has no idea. And I remember feeling quite annoyed that this guy was even getting airtime to make his assertion that what these people had seen was a lighthouse, because Charles had said to me it was no lighthouse. It was a very clear craft or object of some kind, like a big red eye, moving through the trees in the forest. And he was backed up and corroborated by multiple witnesses. And more importantly, as emerged later on, it was tracked on radar. So whatever it was real. And when I went back through for the research for my book, I was struck that Raf Bentwaters had been the subject of other interesting sightings, including one that even the Condon Inquiry, the notorious whitewash that the US government instigated in the 1950s, it also wasn't able to explain another incident at Raf Bentwaters where there were objects seen on radar and tracked at apparently tens of thousands of miles an hour. And I guess it just piqued my interest. I was fascinated by the fact that there is this subject that nominally, for reasons I've never understood, people say, oh yeah, they're all fucking tinfoil hat loonies, you just ignore them. And the irony is that when I've sat down with them, they don't come across as loonies at all. Often, yes, sure, there are crazy people who are attracted to this subject matter. I've had my fair share of them in the last few weeks since we did the documentary we aired. But there is a cadre of really intellectually engaged people, and I've been privileged, and John, you're one of them, and Damien, you're another, to basically have the privilege to be able to suck the brains of people like yourselves who've had these experiences and these this knowledge, and when you test it, as you do as a journalist, when you examine it, you can't discount it. And I'm really struck. There's a quote that I use in my book where one UFO skeptic actually says that witness evidence is not evidence as far as we are concerned. And when you hear that, it sounds kind of logical in a way, but it's not. It's ridiculous, because witness evidence is, by definition, evidence. We convict people. We send people to jail. America kills people on the basis of witness evidence. And yet scientists are pompously dictating that witness evidence is not relevant. The irony is that the problem for ufology is that it's not a replicable experiment. There's not a hypothesis that can be tested about what they are, because you can't repeat the experiment. You can't make UFOs appear. But boy, somebody like Damien's come as close as you can expect. There is a phenomenon that is engaging with Damien, I think, in a conscious way. I don't understand it. I don't know what it is. But to my delight, the American military has basically been forced into a corner by, I think, a very aggressive UFO Twitter, and forced to admit that there is indeed a phenomenon that is real. And I'm not saying all UFO sightings are real. I'm not saying all of these objects are something paranormal or inexplicable. Yes, there are benign, prosaic explanations for, I suspect, a lot of them. But as numerous inquiries have found, and again in this UAP inquiry that we've seen tabled today, or yesterday, your time, 143 out of 144 sightings could not be explained with prosaic explanations. And I think that's a momentous moment in human history, where after 75 years of being told that this is not a national security concern, that there is no threat to public safety, the Pentagon's called bullshit on itself, finally, and admitted that it's real and that it is a threat to national security, that pilots are genuinely concerned. One of the things I was disappointed about with the report was it didn't go anywhere near The Bear in the Room, which is UFOs and nukes. Beautiful book written by my good friend Robert Hastings, which I think is probably the best book on the subject, where he actually makes the point that there is an absolute definite link between the UFOs and nuclear weapons. And again, that's another thing that prompted my interest in Australia, because obviously there's Bob Salas, who was one of the people we interviewed in our film, a former ICBM launch controller. But in Australia, we have facilities like Pine Gap, which is absolutely integral to the American nuclear deterrence. We also have another facility called, lesser known, called Harold Holt Naval Communications Station, which was run by the Americans until 1991. And quite literally, in the event of nuclear war, if the president gave the order for a launch, the bulk of the nuclear submarines that carried ICBM Polaris missiles would launch on an order that came through the transmitters in the Australian base of Harold E. Holt Naval Communications Station. So if there is an intelligence, if there is some kind of a consciousness taking an interest in the facilities that we use to deploy nuclear weapons, I don't think it's a coincidence that there's been an unusual amount of activity in northwest Australia near this base.
So I became aware of you, Ross, because there was a lot of talk on UFO Twitter quite a few years ago now, probably 3 years ago. It was like very hush-hush, behind-the-scenes discussion amongst ufologists. Don't say anything. Everyone was saying, but Ross Coulthart is writing a book on the topic. Yeah, so I didn't even know who Ross Coulthart was at that point. So I go looking for Ross Coulthart and I find you. I mean, that's how we made contact initially. Let me just show you. You are writing a book on it, so I'll show you a book, Ross, so that everyone can see that. It's going to be out next month, so you can pre-order it now, everyone. So I suggest you do that. We're not going to go into that because that's another topic altogether, and you're going to be doing this again with Jay tomorrow, another interview. So you can go into depth of that with Jay. That's fine. But how long was it before you were researching this? You had an interest before you decided it warrants a book. You know what?
Look, I've been collecting stuff for years, and as a journalist, and especially somebody who's got a reputation for doing investigative work, you get a lot of people approaching you. I mean, one of the people who came up here, and God rest her soul, she's passed away now, was Mariana Flynn, who was a very well-known Australian ufologist. I think she only died, Damien, about a year ago. Is that right? A year, 2 years ago?
Yeah, a couple of years ago. Yeah, it wasn't that long ago at all. Yeah.
But I mean, look, I freely admit that Mariana used to ring me, and I don't know how she got my phone number, but she was bloody annoying. And she'd ring me and harass me to do UFO stories. And one of the people she introduced me to was a guy who lives in a little country town called Burrawa, who I won't use his name here, but he's quite a private individual. But he and I have become quite good friends, and he sees things, weird things like Damien does. And he's photographed some of them. And periodically he'll ring me and tell me that he's had a psychic episode where he sees something that's about to happen. And then 3 or 4 weeks later, bang, it happens. And I don't know why these people reach out to me, but I have a lot of people like that who've approached me, who tell me things. And he's one of them. I have people in the defence and intelligence services in Australia, and I think people would be shocked actually to know who they are. But you know, people I've met on other stories, and when they found out that I'm researching a book, one guy in particular just said, "Come and see me," and I thought I was going to get a drop on North Korea or something, and instead he sat me down and told me what he knew about UFOs. And one of the things he told me about was how you were talking earlier about orbs moving in nuclear facilities. And I think that was a Hal Puthoff NIDS room that was secure. I spoke to somebody.
Oh, it's Robert Bigelow. Robert
Bigelow's. Oh, was it Bigelow? Oh, right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking to somebody who told me that they were briefed about something that happened at Pine Gap, which is probably one of the most sensitive American bases outside of America, where we monitor space materials. Essentially, it's a ballistic missile warning system, among other things. But they described how there was a massive UFO flap because an orb went through the entire facility, and people are running after it, trying to engage with it, trying to make it go away, and it's moving through solid objects. It's displaying all of the phenomena that are described by slide 9. It went into facilities underground, into areas that were regarded as highly top secret, including, to the consternation of my Australian source, a part of the base that Australians aren't even allowed into. And it was very interesting because I've looked in the Australian archives files for any record of such an incident, which I was told was well investigated. I've also searched in American archives, and there's absolutely nothing there, but I'm very, very sure the incident took place. And I suppose a long-winded answer to your question about why am I interested in this subject is because it's a bloody good mystery. I mean, it's a, as we would say in Australia, it's a ball terror of a mystery. It's amazing. It is. I mean, what are the two biggest mysteries? I love your saying. What happens? What are the two biggest mysteries? What happens to you after you die, and what the hell are these bloody UFOs? And the thing that really gets me is I'm naturally drawn to contrarian stories. So when somebody tells me that I'm not allowed to investigate something because it's the wrong thing to do, my attitude is, well, why? And I've been told by so many eminent journalists and commentators that I'm putting my reputation at risk by doing the book that I've done and the documentary that I've done. And the irony is that since I did the documentary, I've had approaches from so many different media organizations wanting me to help them now because they're trying to play catch up to find out what the hell's this UFO story. And I think there's a beginning of an awakening in the mainstream media that, oh gosh, even the Pentagon's admitting that this is real. Wow, we'd better start doing stories. We'd better start taking this seriously. Coulthart's not crazy after all. It's quite funny. And I've been looking over my shoulder for 2-3 years now, often talking to you, John, at moments when there's been like gobsmacking revelations coming out in the sort of social media networks of ufology. One of them, of course, being the Admiral Wilson document. And, I've been fascinated, wondering, well, where the hell is the rest of the media? Why? To me, the story shouldn't be, why am I looking at this subject? The issue is, why aren't the rest of the media? It's the biggest bloody story of the moment. It's huge. You've got the Pentagon, for fuck's sake, saying this is real. There is a phenomenon that is doing things that are beyond known human science. And no tinfoil hat debunker, skeptic, is going to convince me otherwise. It's not enough just to put up a prosaic explanation that might just fit. It's not enough to say it was a seagull. It's not enough to say, oh, yeah, it might be a reflection off a cockpit window. You've got to prove your debunking position. And to some extent, I'm kind of with Michio Kaku on this, the astrophysicist who's basically said that the burden of proof is now reversed. The evidence, in my mind, is so overwhelming that there is a phenomenon that is real that it's now for the debunkers to put up or shut up, because the mainstream media now is waking up like a lumbering giant. It's terrified that it's going to get embarrassed. And that's been the thing, I think, that has essentially stopped a lot of the media from talking about the issue. I don't think there's some guy from the CIA or Men in Black going around saying, son, you're not doing that story. It's not that at all. I think it's a simple matter of the media being so frightened of ridicule. They're terrified of putting a foot wrong and being mocked. And now things are changing, and I think it's going to develop a momentum. I've had approaches. I'm part of a group called ICIJ, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. And, you know, that's the group that broke the Panama Papers story. They've broken a lot of huge stories around the world in collaborative investigative journalism. And a number of the journalists in that group have actually become aware that I'm doing a book on UFOs. And I have to admit, when they first reached out to me, I was expecting them to sort of have a go at me and say, well, what the hell are you doing? You know, why are you even looking at this? Why are you hanging your shingle out, inviting people to contact you about this subject? And quite a number of them have actually said to me, look, you might find this useful, or you should talk to this chap. He's really good. There's now, I think, the beginning of a curiosity that is developing a momentum into this subject that I think is going to be unstoppable. And I'm very optimistic, frankly, that the Pentagon's frankly got no idea about what it's unleashed, because I have a strong suspicion that even by setting the date of when they looked at these sightings from the Nimitz incident, the 2004 incident, what they're trying to do is control the narrative, because and this is where the journo in me gets interested in this. And sorry, I'm probably taking too much of your time.
No, I'm loving it. Carry on.
One of the moments for me that really got me, as a journo, you try and pin a politician down by the statements that he or she makes. And so that's why we keep copies of what the Prime Minister says or what the President says. And so I went through the old presidential archives, and the question in my mind was, what has any president ever said about UFOs? And it's interesting because very few of them have actually said much at all, really. I mean, there's been a few comments recently from Obama, I know. Hillary Clinton's husband, Bill, of course, made a couple of comments about how he tried to find stuff out. But during the actual presidencies, presidents are conspicuous by their failure to actually say much at all, except for Obama, the Obama White House. And they put out a press release. The Obama White House put out a press release in 2011 where they basically talked about how there was no evidence of human contact with extraterrestrial life. There was no evidence of extraterrestrial visitations to planet Earth. And it's really interesting because I don't know whether, in the light of the growing preponderance of evidence, that's a sustainable position. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see whether it emerges that the White House lied to the American public, whether the White House or indeed sections of the American military-industrial complex have been deceiving the American public for part of the last 75, 76 years. And, you know, ultimately, that's the one time I can point to where there's been a definitive statement made by a president, a sitting president. And I spoke to Elizondo and Mellon, Chris Mellon, when I was doing my film. And I asked them, I said, there's that incident in the 2011 Obama White House where they put out the press statement. You know, what if it turns out that they lied? What happens? And both of them giggled independently and said, well, nothing. Presidents and governments lie all the time. And we discussed, and this is one of the things that we actually haven't put into the current form of the documentary, but we will be putting in a later form. We discussed, well, what if they have lied? And what if it is true that, as the New York Times itself has reported, there is alien material not of this earth that has been recovered by the US government? What if that turns out to be true? And they all went, presidents lie all the time. Governments lie all the time. It's not an offense to lie to the American public. But what we did discuss is there's going to be a reckoning, that if it does transpire that governments have lied, there's going to be a reckoning. And I have a hunch that that's why the UAP task force is trying to control the narrative by dictating that we're looking at sightings from 2004 onwards. They're trying to obscure the history. And I love history. I'm a historian before I'm a journalist. I love looking at history. And one of the things I enjoyed doing in my book was going back and looking at what had happened in American history. And we are at a point now where America was in the early 1950s. where you had a former director of the CIA, Roscoe Hillenkotter, a hero of the USS Missouri, wounded in Pearl Harbor, an indubitable American patriot who went public after he left the CIA and founded a UFO disclosure organization. He was linked up with a couple of other admirals, and you actually had former highly senior intelligence officers and serving military people, sound familiar, who were basically advocating for disclosure. And then all of a sudden, the American government announced inquiries into the phenomenon. Sound familiar? And then all of a sudden, they were fobbed off. The public were fobbed off with, frankly, bullshit reports for 10, 15, 20 years. Blue Book, Condon, Grudge, all of these reports that were essentially designed to shut down. Let's call it for what it is. They were cover-ups. They were designed to shut down public scrutiny of the issue, to suppress discussion of the issue. Why? And so the more I looked at it, the more I digged, the more, to me, it stank like a big shiny turd. There was something at the bottom of all of this that stank. And let's call it for what it is. It's bullshit, and it's time that it's exposed. And I think we're at a really interesting moment in history now where, I mean, here we are. We're talking on technology that probably didn't exist 10 years ago. The capacity for four of us at different points in the world to have a conversation on the web, share ideas. That's incredibly powerful.
Instantly,
and it scares the hell out of governments and authoritarian governments that have tried to control public thought. And what we've had in ufology for the last 75 years is an attempt to control public thought. And now, I think, in an attempt to regain the narrative, the Pentagon's basically come out with what is essentially a bit of a fop. Let's be honest about it. They know a hell of a lot more than they're letting on. And certainly, I don't think it's going to hold. I think eventually what they know will leak. And I think that it will seriously test the claims that were made in that press release by the Obama White House.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, my hope is that the annex is going to leak. In the next few days, I'm hoping if as powerful as some people are telling me it is, with the main report is the same sort of thing. We've been told the same thing for the last 70 years. There's nothing new at all, really, in the new report, apart from one thing, which was that I noticed that they could possibly track these things via RF signals. They made a big hint in the report to that. So hopefully some of the people are going to notice that and people will follow up on that. But the main thing is
another thing was signature masking. I thought that was incredibly significant. Yeah. That's actually an intelligence defense term that is actually quite important, that these objects have the capacity to mask their signature, in ways that allegedly can make them invisible, completely invisible to the naked eye, and often on occasion invisible to even infrared sensors. And I thought it was very significant that the report was attaching a lot of significance to that. I was disappointed it didn't talk about its transmedium capacities, because I suspect that's in the unredacted version of the report. I think all the good stuff's probably in the version that's been given quietly to the Senate Intelligence Committee in top secret hearings.
Does transmedium also mean it can pass through matter? Because I alluded to that earlier on, and then you said to us that these things have entered a base in Australia, a very important base, a secret base, and it actually went inside the base.
Yep. Well,
Thanks
certainly
for us that, by the way, Ross.
Yeah. Well, certainly the Rendlesham story as well involves the object, and this was a particularly sensitive issue that I know they tried to sit on for a long time, but that the object was seen to be using a light of some kind to penetrate the nuclear weapons silos at the Rendlesham base, the Bentwaters base. And it's quite a common issue. I mean, one of the things that's emerged since I did the story that we aired, the UFO phenomenon on the 7 network here in Australia about Northwest Cape, I've had people approach me from the community who've described frequently seeing orbs of some kind that they think are intelligently controlled. And, you know, I'm not there. I didn't see what they saw, but there's probably, 8 to 10 people who've independently told me that they've seen these orbs that appear solid. They're almost metallic with a reddish light that basically hover and follow them. And I think they can't all be mad. and the thing that really amuses me is, you know, probably 25, 30 years ago, if I was the chief of staff of a news desk of a TV station or a newspaper, I would have thought, oh, Christ, we've got a live one here, you know. But, I mean, I can tell you, I mean, we have had, since I did that UFO phenomenon documentary for 7, I think the last time I looked, it's horrific. It's actually, I'm so tired at the moment from reading all the material. At least 10,500 to 11,000 messages have come in as a result of that one story. Most of them are people who are saying they've seen similar objects to the one that Annie, my informant, told me she'd seen up at the base in Northwest Cape, or objects such as orbs, lights, craft from all over, not just Australia, but all over the world. And the thing that really shocks me, there's a lovely saying that when governments have their head up their arse, there's always this thing called the wisdom of the crowd, that people instinctively know. And I've never met a subject before in journalism, a subject for investigation, where there is such a wisdom of the crowd, where people know stuff intuitively. And when I say to people I'm writing a book on UFOs, I can honestly tell you that for the 2.5, 3 years I've been doing this, I've probably had a handful of ridicule skeptics. 99.999% of people basically go, yes, thank God somebody's looking at this issue. And it's like there is this blockage, this cognitive dissonance that's released. And I must confess, were it not for the fact that I deal in facts and I'm meant to be an objective analysis of evidence, I would almost get the impression that whatever it is, the phenomenon is screwing with human perception to stop us from taking an interest in it. That you know, it's not entirely a coincidence that when, say, Damien sees something or John sees something, not everybody sees it because it's meddling with your perception.
It's more than that as well, Ross, because sometimes they even delete your SD card on your camera. I've had that. You know, I've checked a camera before I've gone outside. I've taken a picture. There's been no problems. I've tried doing videos and I've seen the little red light flashing, showing me the recording is being made. I've come back inside. There's nothing on the camera. There's nothing on the SD card. There's nothing on the internal memory. You know, now what's going on there? You know, the next day I use the same camera, no problem at all. Doing exactly the same thing. Something is manipulating us.
They tend to have physical traces, and they do have physical effects on people and equipment. So it kind of there's the whole perception part of it too. I agree with you what you're saying there, Ross. It is the high strangeness part of it, that they do have a connection with individuals, with humans, like almost like they can read your mind. Yeah, it's really strange. It's a bizarre side of the whole phenomenon.
There's a picture I took here, Ross, of you've seen it before, but when you're talking about that one that went to the Australian secret base and maybe went inside, maybe this is the sort of thing that they saw. That's an orange orb that I took. That was the one that landed down the Gower. So that'll give people an idea. The lights behind are street lights on the opposite coastline, if anyone asks. So there we go. That's that. That's what an orb looks like. Okay, so I mean, let's talk about the report again, because Keith Basterfield said something really interesting. He's in a group that we chat with, Ross. He said something interesting about the report, and I didn't really see this myself, but at the time when I was reading it, but he's absolutely spot on. He said it's actually a big deal despite its limitations. Back in 1969, Condon insisted that UFOs were not a national security threat and that no US agency should bother studying the topic in the future. The UAPTF report upends both of this 52-year-old edicts. They really like the fact that the DoD will now establish something to continue the UAPTF work. Traditionally, a TF is stood up to complete a mission and then stood down when that mission is complete. He's spot on with that. He's so clued up is Keith on this. We're so lucky to have him in the topic. It's like having you in the topic. We're really getting some real good people. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with what he's saying there?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, you just look at history. I mean, we've been told pretty much since the Washington UFO flap, when a decision was clearly made to try and shut this whole subject down, and they kicked off the various Project Grudge inquiries and then right through to Condon and Project Blue Book. Let's be honest about it, the focus has always been consistently to find as many prosaic explanations as possible for the phenomenon to try and dampen public inquisitiveness. And if you actually look at the CIA files that are publicly available on the CIA library database, there was a very deliberate decision made to ridicule and stigmatize this subject. This is the other thing that blew me away, is that when I was doing my research, the decision to stigmatize and ridicule this subject was a deliberate one made by groups inside the Central Intelligence Agency, possibly for a plausible reason, which is that during the Cold War, so many people were reporting UFO sightings that it was actually stopping the ability of America to sift out possible breaches of their airspace by Russian or other enemy aircraft that might have posed a threat. And so a decision was made to try and deter people from reporting UFOs. But no, there's been a very active disinformation campaign to try and ridicule and stigmatize the subject. And more importantly than that, they never actually answered the question. When people asked, are these objects real? The consistent answer that came back from the US Department of Defense, or the Air Force in particular, especially the Office of Air Force Investigations, Special Investigations, was these are not a threat to national security. And time again, I'd read these things and I'd go, but that's not the bloody question. The question was, are these things real? Yeah. And they'd just come back and they'd say, these things are not a threat to national security. Don't worry, we'll arrogantly tell you in our own pompous way, fuck off, and we'll let you know when we're in good time to tell you. The public can sell bullshit when they see it. And I call bullshit on what the US Air Force is doing at the moment. But by all accounts, from my own sources in the Pentagon, the US Air Force has not been cooperating with the UAP task force. It's been willfully putting obstruction in the path of the people doing investigations. And if you look at the files, if you go back and have a look at your history, it's a matter of public record that the US Air Force has been out there at the forefront doing its level best to try and gag public interest in the subject matter. Why? Why not encourage a debate? If there is objects that are breaching our airspace, that are clearly causing flight incursions that are threatening and distressing pilots, they are by definition a threat to national security. I'm not necessarily contradicting the Stephen Greer take on the world, which is that, aliens may all be nice and cuddly and lovely. But the bottom line is anything that threatens American military hegemony is by definition a threat. And I've never understood, in all of the reading that I've done in the history of America's engagement with the subject of UFOs, there's been this constant line that it's not a threat to national security. But by definition, it must be. And that is why what's come out today is so important. Yes, we had the admission last year that the videos were real and that they couldn't explain them. There was no prosaic explanation that could benignly explain these weird objects like the tic-tac, the gimbal, and the go-fast. But what they've done in the last 24 hours is they've gone one step further. They've admitted that this is a national security problem. This is a flight safety problem. And you know what? I know the US Air Force is pissed off about that. My sources tell me the US Air Force has been actively trying to interrupt and obstruct this inquiry, and they'll continue to try to do so. So what's really fascinating to me is where this has come from, because again, look at your history. If you go back and look at the people who instigated the early ufology movements back in the 1950s, a lot of them, the most of them, came from the Navy, the US Navy. There was an Admiral Farney. There was a Roscoe Hillenkotter, Admiral. There were people inside the US Navy who had the balls to admit that this was a problem. And their crews were seeing this stuff, and they weren't prepared to put up with the obfuscation that they were encountering from the Air Force. And indeed, I think it was Farney who, on occasion, much to the consternation of the Air Force, he'd get leaked material straight from Navy servicemen who would leak to him incidents that were recorded by the Navy, and then he'd go public with them, and efforts to try and stop him were initially unsuccessful. But what happened, and this is why I think we have to be really careful now, because we've got this offer now of a UAP task force, which we're assured is going to investigate things. I'm not so sure. I certainly don't think that the public will be being told the truth of what even the UAP task force knows right now. I'm sure they know a hell of a lot more than they're letting on. I'm sure they know how to track these objects. I've spoken to somebody for my book who's told me that as long as 25, 30 years ago, they knew how to find the electromagnetic signature for these objects. They knew how to track them. They'd actually tracked them going in and out of the sea, I think south of Florida. I'm
the
aware
Russians have
of,
confirmed that as well, Ross, haven't they?
Yeah,
The Russians.
yeah.
I mean, it's even when we're talking about the threat sort of thing, the Russians in 2006 basically released a documentary. It's clearly from the Russian government because of all the generals, the admirals, and all the people that took part. There were more generals and admirals in that one video than the entire history of the American disclosure movement by the government side of things in America. You know, it was shocking. But in that video, they admitted submarines have been lost, aircraft have been lost. They've tried to shoot these things down. Fake helicopters were used to distract when they were trying to capture objects under the sea, and they were used to distract, and they actually escaped because of the fake helicopters. Everything that we've been talking about is covered.
I think one of the most interesting documents is the Condign report, which is the report that your British Ministry of Defence did. And it actually records how the Russians, I think General Sokolov actually admitted that they'd lost multiple aircraft that had attempted to engage with these objects. Pilots had died. I mean, that's serious. And by any definition, that's a national security threat.
The Russians actually said in that video that the Americans had lost submarines as well. Now, the Americans have never admitted that, but that's what they said in there. And they even give the locations where the submarines have been lost, which was interesting. I mean, that was clearly a video that was put out there to say, stop trying to say this is us. You know, we are telling you now it's not us. I mean, we had that incident in Sweden where there was some object under the ocean, and they were trying to track it and capture it in a fjord area. And they never found out what it was, and they claimed it was a Russian submarine. Well, the Russians always denied that. Yeah, again, there were the Russians being blamed early doors. It seems.
Well, it's funny. This is a complete tangent, but I was amused. I was reading earlier on this evening about the couple who were falsely accused of flying a drone over Gatwick Airport, and they've just been exonerated. And so one of the things that I did encounter in my research was I spoke to a pilot of an Australian aircraft who'd been flying into Gatwick, and he'd seen this object, and he spoke to me 2.5, 3 years ago, and basically told me that what he saw was not a drone. It was clearly a much more maneuverable and more intelligently controlled object than a drone, much, much faster. And he actually had heard about me doing the research into a book on UFOs, and he said, you should look at the Gatwick incident. And it's interesting because just completely serendipitously, the announcement was made in the newspapers today, I think in the last 24 hours, that the couple are taking legal action because they were falsely accused and essentially dragged through the mud by the British press, because the British police left the public with the impression that this poor couple was responsible for flying a drone over one of the busiest airports in the United Kingdom. And it interests me because in Australia, over a city called Perth in Western Australia, when I heard what the Australian pilot told me, I looked at an Air Transport Safety Bureau investigation report into an identical incident that took place near Perth, involving a drone which did mysterious things that completely baffled the pilots. And I haven't spoken directly to the pilots in the Australian case, but I'm told that they're adamant that what they saw was not a commercial drone, and that its maneuverability and speed completely defied known science.
Well, I mean, the Gatwick one, you've got the UK government. Why didn't they shoot it down? It's one of the busiest airports in the world. It's the second busiest airport in the UK. And they managed to shut down an airport for a few days while this thing decided to fly around. And why wouldn't they shoot it down? I'm lost on that, you know? I've never understood that one.
But what really gets me is that's a bloody good story, isn't it?
Yeah.
And why has the mainstream media allowed itself to be snowed? Because it was snowed with the explanation that it was a commercial drone. Somebody thought that up. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying there's a guy in a grey suit who walks into a newspaper office and basically says, you're not going to do this story, old chap. But what there certainly is a factor that makes editors fearful of expending resources on investigating the subject. And it's interesting because I can tell you that the story that we did on UFOs, UAPs on one of Australia's biggest commercial networks just a few weeks ago, it was an absolute ratings winner for them. It was the highest rating program of the year for that network. People were turning on because they wanted to see this subject investigated. And the thing I'm really proud and happy about is, as a journalist, I have had literally, over 11,000 people contact me independently offering me information since that program. People want this stuff investigated. And I think the mainstream media will eventually wake up to that fact. But one of the things we have to be very, very careful about is remember our history and remember that the Condon Report was a whitewash, Project Grudge was a whitewash, Blue Book was ultimately a whitewash, and that'll happen again if they can get away with it, especially the US Air Force.
They've had a battle plan to get to this point. Mellon, Podesta, McCaslin, WikiLeaks basically showed us that this was all being a pre-planned operation, you could call it, to get us to the point where we are now. Even with the way the TTSA team was all put together, the types of people. I mean, we never hear from Jim Semivan. Now it amazes me. Head of the CIA, apparently, or one of the heads of the CIA. I'm also told he was involved with the FBI as well. He was supposed to be doing the job that Lou Elizondo did originally, but for some reason Lou comes into the team as well, and he took the role of Jim. So I don't understand where that part of it came from. But where do you think we're going now then after this? We've just had the report. Where do you think we're going to be going next with it, Ross? You know, if this doesn't, it's not a big deal at the moment. It's a rehash at the moment almost. So what's the next step?
I think the big moment will come if what Marco Rubio has predicted comes to pass. Marco Rubio was doorstopped earlier today, and he told journalists that he would like to see congressional hearings begin into UAPs within the next few months.
Wow.
Might even be the next few weeks. Now, if that happens, if people are deposed under oath, honourable military senior brass, They're not going to lie. I would like, for example, I'd like to see Admiral Tom Wilson, the alleged author of the Wilson memo. Sorry, start again. The alleged source for the Wilson memo. I'd like to see him deposed under oath. He might be more comfortable doing it in camera, but it would be good for the Senate or the Congress to hear exactly what he actually believes when he knows that he's released from the oath of office, that he has the security classifications that stop him from talking candidly in public about what he knows. I'd like to see the congressional inquiries a bit like the old Watergate inquiries. I actually think there is a public hunger for public hearings. And I know certainly Elizondo and Chris Mellon are pushing for that. It remains to be seen whether there's the political will. And a lot really rests on whether Joe Biden has the bottle to go ahead with this, because there will be an enormous amount of kickback, particularly from the US Air Force and the CIA. You might notice the CIA had not cooperated at all with the UAP task force inquiry. And the Air Force, apparently, even though it was legally obliged to do so, apparently obstructed and obfuscated and made it as difficult as possible for the UAP task force investigators. So it's going to be very, very interesting, but I would like to see top brass deposed. And I'd like to see people in my country deposed, the people that run the Pine Gap installation in the centre of Australia, the people who were in charge in 1991 when, during the Six-Day War, a dark spherical object was witnessed by the American deputy commander of the base, the Harold Holt Naval Communications Station, hovering over the communications station within hours of an American decision to go to DEFCON 3. Somewhere in the American archives, there are files that record those incidents. I'd like to know who were the Americans that were taking a strong interest in the Westall 1966 incident, which is apart from Ariel, it's one of the other large mass sightings by school children of elliptical flying saucer-shaped craft. That's an image of the craft that was seen by many, in fact, over 200 people on the scene that day.
But the headmaster, wasn't he warned that he had to shut up or lose his job or something along those lines? Isn't he just admitted that?
He wasn't the headmaster. He was the science teacher, Andrew Greenwood. And yes, he was basically told that if he spoke any more about this, then he would be slurred with a false accusation that he was an alcoholic and he would lose his teaching license. And that was a threat made by somebody from the Australian Air Force wearing an Air Force uniform, and somebody whom he assumed to be from the intelligence services, maybe our ASIO, the secret intelligence organization. And, clearly, there was a moment for me when I was doing my research where I'd heard about the Westall incident, and I was going down for we'd asked if a whole group of the witnesses could come along and let us film them on a particular Saturday, and we organised for it to be as close as possible to the 55th anniversary of the event, which was the 6th of April. And I think we put out a flyer in late March, basically saying, if you can be there on the 10th of April on the Saturday, we'd love to see you. And one of the people who called me was an old source of mine who, I can't reveal who he is, but he's an extremely senior and highly reputable former public servant, federal public servant, eminent, well-respected, beyond reproach. And he said to me, "Why are you looking at Westall?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I've never told you this, but my dad wrote the secret report." And I laughed and I said, "You mean the one they say doesn't exist?" And it's been one of these great hoary thorns for years. There's a lovely fellow called Shane Ryan in Canberra who's been trying for years to procure the secret report into the Westall incident. And he's failed because the Australian government says that there is no such report and there never was such a report. Well, I now know that there is a report. There was a report, and I know who wrote it. And I know for a fact that it was written. And somebody, somewhere, either through ineptitude or through conspiracy, has basically concealed that report. And we'll get to the bottom of it and find it.
Hopefully.
This has been. Oh, you got a question? Sorry, there, Dave. Carry on.
It's more of a question to cap things off. We've got In Plain Sight coming up just on the horizon, but is there anything else you're working on in regards to this field for after the book comes out?
Yep, we're working on an international version of the documentary that we made, funnily enough, originally just for domestic consumption, domestic Australian consumption. I think we made, in the end, it was about nearly 80 minutes, so an hour 20. But I've got so much material from that film, particularly interviews with key players in the US like Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, Robert Salas, and others that I'd like to include in a longer format of the film. That what we're doing at the moment is preparing a documentary for international release. And as well as that, I've got an avalanche of new information that has come in from military, intelligence, civilians, government officials. I even had a cabinet minister from our Australian government, our federal government in Australia, and he rang me and he was whispering down the phone. And I said, "You really don't have to whisper. Nobody can hear you." And he was so paranoid because he wanted me to know that he'd seen a UFO. And it was a fairly innocuous UFO sighting, but it had clearly been one of the most important events in his life. And he's a serving cabinet minister in our government in a very trusted position. And at times in his career, he's had supervision of portfolios in government that would have given him access to find out what dark secrets are being kept by governments about this issue. And he would have been in a position to ask our American allies what they know about this issue. And I was joking with him. I said, seriously, I said, if anybody could find out, you could. I said, why don't you rattle the cage for me? And so between you and me, he's doing a little bit of rattling behind the scenes and just seeing what he can rattle out for me.
Brilliant. Sounds good. Can't wait. And what about you, Damien? Have you got anything going on right now? Any books, documentaries, or movies on the horizon?
I'm working on 2 documentaries right now. Fractured Realities Part 2. Part 1's already out there. Also a documentary called Haunted Skies, which goes into the connection with, paranormal connection and high strangeness and all that with UFOs.
I love that name.
It's pretty cool. I'm also working on a 3rd one called Paranatural Enigma, which I believe the phenomenon is a natural phenomenon. We just don't understand it yet. So hence the name Paranatural. Paranormal, natural. Yeah. Anyway, a bit of play on words, whatever. I'm working on a book as well, but I've been working on it for like almost 6 years. So, and it feels like there's still an end to the story to come. I don't want to finish the book and then have to write another, book down the track sort of thing. So I'm kind of waiting for some big event to happen, and then I can just write that in the book, and that'll be it. But yeah, I know there's a Canadian documentary coming out where a UFO appeared while they were interviewing me and stuff like that. And that's coming out in a month or so. That's a big budget one. I think that's going on Amazon and Netflix and all that sort of stuff as well.
Brilliant.
So that should be interesting. So yeah, there's a fair bit of things happening. A couple other documentaries coming out before the end of the year as well that are being made. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And I'm getting few conferences coming up online and stuff like that, and that's about it pretty much.
I'm looking forward to see what you both do next, to be honest.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get you both back on because there's so many other things we haven't even touched on. I've skipped through loads and loads of questions with you, Damien, because I really wanted to ask, because I knew that we were going through the time so much that I could, Ross had to be asking questions as well. So guys, this has been fantastic.
Yeah,
We'll call it a wrap now, and hopefully we can pick this up again in the future. Really looking forward to see what you're going to be doing next, Damien, and that sounds really interesting. And Ross, I'm really hoping that you are going to get that international documentary out, because we did get to see it on UFO Twitter, because there were some naughty people out there that made copies, and but that's not the world. You know, the rest of the world needs to see the documentary. There's only a few thousand people on UFO Twitter at the end of the day. So really looking forward to. Yeah, really looking forward to getting my signed copy, sent it through the post shortly. So let's call it a wrap, and thank you ever so much, guys. Thank you. Look after yourselves, and we'll do this again.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Much appreciated.